Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you will receive alerts when there are new episodes. Go get it.
This is what I tell them. Look, I've been grinding for so long, I wake up and chase my goals. I go out and I go get it. Hot or cold, that's all I know. I don't succeed, then I don't breathe. Success, what does it mean? If I conquer all my goals, then I'm living out my dream. Dig deep, go out and get it. Success Chronicles. Compete until it's finished. Success Chronicles. Go take care of your business. Success Chronicles. It's deeper than just winning. Success Chronicles.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Chip Baker coming to you with another session on the Success Chronicles. So excited to have Miss Morgan Michael with us on. Great lady doing some great things. And I'm so excited to highlight her and share her journey with you. So first, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me again.
Chip, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited. I always love our conversations. I know when I had you on my podcast, I had a lot of feedback. You just bring so much wisdom, a sense of calm, I think, too, and like peace. And I always learn something when I talk to you. So I'm really excited about this.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate it. I just think, just knowing your background and your journey and knowing you, we've been blessed and fortunate to achieve and learn and grow some amazing things. And I think it's awesome when we can get opportunities, like this, like what we do in education, like speaking, all of those things to share our experiences. I think it also inspires us to continue to work harder to grow and learn.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into you. If you don't mind, just sharing a little bit about, who you are and what you do so the audience can have an idea, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so my name is Morgan Michael. I'm an educator first and foremost. I've been teaching for, oh my gosh, this is my 17th year. I'm on the west coast of Canada in a smaller town called Victoria, just outside of Vancouver. I got two kids. I got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I feel very, very lucky to be a mom. And in about 2018, so several years ago now, I started writing a blog, and it was for educators, and it was centered around kindness. And it sort of rippled out into a podcast, which is called Kindsight 101. And I've got 200 plus episodes now with people such as you, Chip, people like Seth Godin, and people who just want to help us make life edits to make our lives better, whether we're educators, service people, people in the healthcare professions, really just about helping people be better and achieve success. I think in many ways it parallels some of the work that you're doing, Chip. And I've been so fascinated with this. When COVID hit, I started deep diving into burnout, and I actually ended up writing a book called From Burnt Out to Fired Up. And then that was quite successful. And I did a lot of speaking into the United States and Canada and just helping teachers with burnout and leaders as well. And then just recently, I had my new book come out called The Blueprint for Belonging. And it's all about how do we create a culture of belonging and deep belonging, where people feel like they are part of something, like they're part of a family, whether they are staff members or whether they are students. So it's really a book for leaders, and it's a book for educators in the classroom as well, and has a ton of really tangible, actionable strategies. So that's a bit about me.
That's awesome. Just hearing you discuss all of the cool things. I think first off, I know it can be exhausting, but it's also exciting because you're continuing to learn and grow and share with others. I love how you talked about the books being resources, the podcast being a resource people can glean, great gems, if you will. But how has that journey been for you? Like it seems like it would have been lots of growth.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And I think this is what's so important is it started actually when my son was quite young, and I
Mhm.
started journaling. And I think there was a certain restlessness that I had to do more. Like I felt called almost to do something.
Come
And
on.
I didn't know what that was. And what I've realized is that restlessness is usually some connection to God or to the universe or to whatever, whoever it is that you sort of believe is a power greater than yourself that pushes and calls you to be the best version of yourself. And you don't do that for self. It's not for yourself. I think
Right.
really it's about how do you tap into this energy, this power that
Hmm.
helps you to be a servant to the people around you. And that sounds so grandiose, and that's not how it started. But there was, when I was journaling, I wrote down on paper, I want to be an author. I want to be a speaker. I want to write a book. I want to do work that benefits people. And I had no business writing that down because I'd never really written anything beyond, university papers for education. And so it was kind of perplexing. And I leaned into it a little bit and I started doing this project called 21 Day Kindness Challenge.
Mm.
And from there, I started speaking beyond the classroom. I spoke at schools and I started doing assemblies, and we would do these challenges that would push kids to and encourage kids to be kind to one another through these sort of beneficial acts to other people. And then it kind of spun into more and more projects, and that's where the podcast happened. And that was a really beautiful experience. And I think the reason that I love podcasting, and I bet Chip, yours sort of similar, is I get to be a conduit for other people's stories.
Yep.
So many people have like beautiful messages to share, wisdom. And I feel so, so lucky to be on the receiving end of those and to be able to ask questions that brings out the very best version of them. And then from there, I had Solution Tree Publishers reach out and they asked me to write a book. And it was right, and you would not believe this, it was right on the cusp of when the world kind of shut down around COVID. So it was like March 13th, 2020 or something. And it was before anybody was actually burnt out. And so it was a very timely book. And the process of writing was not easy. I had two little
Yeah.
kids at home, something that, is not something that I've shared broadly, but I'm starting to more because I think people appreciate a real story. I went through a big divorce in around that time. So I was writing a book. I
Hmm.
started my master's. I moved my home, sold my home, was trying to be this very stable, and I want to give my co-parent props because we've done a really beautiful job, I think, of maintaining a very healthy environment for our children, and we are amicable and we do the very best that we can to sort of be on the same page. So I'm very proud of that journey too in all of this.
Yeah.
And within all of this, kind of closing the loop on the masters, closing the loop on my first book, doing, being able to sit down with incredible people, stay working, as a teacher, start speaking around the country. All of these things were because at one point I had the courage to kind of write down these big audacious goals.
Hmm.
And I think this journey has sort of taught me, because now on the other side, I've got this second book out. I'm in a wonderful, committed, beautiful relationship with a beautiful person who is just, he's so supportive and so wonderful. My kids love him, everything. And I think that no matter where you find yourself in your life, if something is calling you to open a different door, and to step into the version of yourself that will bring out the best sort of in other people. It might not always be a clean road, but there is so much to be gained from that, and that you can trust in that path as the right path for you. And so I think my message to people is listen to the whispers on your heart, have the courage to write them down, and then take little baby steps toward those goals, because it is incredible when you actually commit yourself how much can come to fruition when you really put your mind to it. So that's my journey.
So good. Um, so true. Um, it's crazy how in our life, the toughest challenges, the and we don't realize it, but like our toughest challenges that we have to grow through on the other side of that is our maximum growth.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Just
Yes.
hearing you discuss, what you all of that you had to learn and grow through. Um, the masters, the relationship, all of those things. I think it sets you up to be more of an inspiration to others, especially when we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable and share bits of those pieces. Now, you can't let everybody in on everything, but just bits and pieces of what you had to grow through, what you learned from it, and how you're using that to help you help others. And so I think it's always neat when we can do those things. But let's talk about your new project. I know you hit on the book a little bit, but let's dive a little bit into the blueprint for belonging. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it sort of came about, to be honest, I was thinking back what it was like to be a kid. And I actually was born in France
Mm,
and I spoke French, only French. My mom was Canadian, but my dad was French. And I grew up in a French house. And we didn't have a lot of money. And we moved to Canada, just I think for new opportunities. We moved to the most rural little island on the west coast of Canada. So it's essentially like the tiniest little, most rural town you can imagine. Very different from France. And so to say at 5 years old, to enter that very different environment, I felt like a total outsider. I didn't speak the language. I kind of
mm,
looked like most of the kids, but like we were so different. I remember even tasting cake for the first time, like, the buttercream frosting type cake. We didn't have
yeah,
stuff like that. Like
that's
kids
good.
in France, they don't snack like that. It's not like a snack kind of culture. So I remember like tasting cake with the buttercream frosting and being like, whoa, this is different. And
Change
having
your
like,
life.
yeah, having like corn pops for the first time, being like, I've never had this before. So, like,
Yeah.
on the outside, I guess I looked kind of the same, but on the inside, I felt so different. And I felt like that experience of walking into that kindergarten class, some of my friends who are still friends with me now remind me, I walked into that classroom, that kindergarten classroom, with a little pink beret on my head. And I was just like, what is happening? So I walk in, I don't speak a lick of English, and I kind of had to learn the ways of this island. And it took me a while. It probably took me until about grade two, second grade, to really get my bearings and start speaking the language more fluently. And during that time, I remember being an observer, and I carried this a little bit into my teen years as well, and probably even into my early adulthood. And I've had to unlearn some of this, but
Mhm.
looking around, observing, kind of figuring out how do I be a chameleon in order to fit in, and
Mm,
sort of hustling a little bit for my worthiness, like wanting to fit in so badly that
come
I would
on.
compromise my integrity, things that mattered to
Mhm.
me, my values, all of these types of things that like every human does when they feel that way, when they feel outside of. And so I think, it was in grade two that I stopped speaking French. So I kind of renounced my identity as a French person because it basically signaled to me that I was outside of this community. And so I was like, well, I can't be that. So let me stop speaking French. Oh my gosh, I don't live with regret. But in that, looking back, I wish I could have gone back in time and just told that little girl, like, you don't need to stop speaking French. That is a
Yeah.
really beautiful part of who you are, your identity. And you don't need to stop just because you feel outside of. Anyway, fast forward to being a teacher on the West Coast. There were no jobs when I graduated. I was like 23 years old and I'm like, I need a job. And what do you know? There's a French immersion program because Canada is, bilingual, and French immersion is on offer for teachers. There
Yeah.
are tons of jobs. Well, I leaned heavily on my French background, and the beautiful full circle piece about that is that French heritage allowed me to get a full-time job, and I taught French immersion for 10 years. So, I think sometimes these things that set us apart, that make us feel different, that are unique or special or quirky, can be our biggest strengths. And the blueprint for belonging or a blueprint for belonging was kind of born from that feeling of being an outsider and understanding on a deep level, it feels like to not fit in and to feel like you are constantly outside of. And so I've set this book up because I think that educators need sort of a roadmap for how do we create a culture that gives that sense of belonging. And then the second piece is, how do leaders set up their schools so that there's a culture of deep belonging and a morale that encourages people to be their best selves?
That's so good, Morgan. Man, it kind of gave me chills when you talked about um the belonging piece and shying away from your Frenchness, if you
Yeah.
will. Uh, but man, I think that just shows the importance, and you talked about this too, of setting up the environment as an educator,
Yeah.
to where everyone belongs,
Yeah.
right? Everyone knows that, hey, what you have in you is enough. You're enough. Just come
Mm.
on in and let's have a good time and let's get better together. And it's
Yeah.
important to set that environment. I think when you have those types of environments, amazing things happen because everyone taps into their greatness.
Yes, exactly. And in
Yeah.
the book, I talk a little bit about, okay, because it's very strategic. And it's one
Hmm.
thing I think for us to, as you know, right? We love to talk about these big ideals, but it's hard actually. How do we actually bring this to life? And so I set up this acronym, basically BUILD, because it's about building. The whole thing is kind of a nod to my mom, who's an architect. Um, and it's about this blueprint for creating this sense of like positive morale. So the first part of build, B, is boundaries. And I've had people ask me like, what? How are boundaries part of building positive morale or like that kind of sense of cohesion? Well, you know what? In this day and age, we're really pushing
Yeah.
gentle
Yeah.
parenting, and we're pushing like kids first. And yes, kids first in many respects. However, I've learned in my 17 years as a primary educator and working with adults too, is we need to have tight boundaries, like what's okay, what's not okay. How can we treat each other so that we feel valued and honored as individuals? All of us deserve that, right? And so having tight boundaries around that and co-creating that and being like, what does it feel like to be part of a community that's collaborative, that's respectful, where you feel loved and you feel like you're part of like a legitimate family? Well, we have certain responsibilities, and some of those things are the language that we speak. I am very, very clear about belonging cues. So when we're setting up our classroom at the beginning of the year, we talk about what are those things that we communicate to each other in nonverbal ways, even when we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
nodding our head. We've got some gentle eye contact. We are, you might even gently touch somebody on the shoulder, but these are all things like if you've come from a family where maybe that wasn't valued. You don't learn that. So, as educators, we have this beautiful opportunity to teach every one of our students. And it gives me chills because I'm like, what a freaking gift, hey, to be
Hmm.
able to do this. But to teach children explicitly, like, listen, when you're in a room with an individual, here's how you can do it in such a way so that you are heard, but you also in turn enable that person to feel valued when they're in front of you. What a beautiful gift. So belonging cues, the verbal affirmations that we can give each other. So those are part of sort of the boundaries that enable us to show up as our best selves and in turn allow others, right? And then the second piece, is it okay if I kind of go through the build acronym? Is that all
Let's
right?
get it.
Okay. So the next piece is understanding. So at some point, we need to tune in. We need to have empathy. We need to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And so when I'm doing speaking, I'll often have role play scenarios where I'm like, okay, imagine this situation. How might you respond to that? If you're an educator, if you're a leader, let's imagine that we're a student and we're going through a difficult time. How could another student in turn support the other student? How are we resolving conflicts in such a way that we're keeping our mindset open and we're understanding each other? And there are lots of activities in the book that lend themselves to that. Bias exploration. So there's an amazing Harvard-based implicit bias test that I recommend in the book. There's a whole section on implicit bias because that's a really important part of belonging, is to understand that we all come to the table with a set of beliefs and a set of biases that prevent us sometimes, if we're not careful, from interacting and from relating to people in a really real way. And so unpacking some of that, being real about it, owning that, and then exploring it through conversation and role play is really an important piece. Um, the next piece is integrity. So doing what you say, saying what you do. That's good leadership, right? That builds
Yes.
trust. But I think we need to get clear on that. So I do a lot of work around values. What do I believe in? What does our organization believe in? And if we can be aligned in that, then we can show up and we can actually have integrity. Without integrity, there's no trust. And without trust, we really can't build a strong team. We can't be good leaders. And I think that integrity is a very, very big part of that. I touched on listening. So we've done B, U, I, and now L for listening. Listening, really comes down to it's kind of very tightly connected to understanding. But listening is about how do we help people to feel heard, uh, acknowledging that people have needs and how do we respond to those needs. We have people who are givers, takers, matchers. Dr. Adam Grant talks about this framework. And if we can kind of understand that people have different motivations, then we can listen to their needs and respond accordingly. So there are so many different types of needs, but our emotional needs for our significance, for a sense of belonging, for feeling like we matter, for feeling like we need a certain amount of variety in our life. All of these things, if we can respond to those and we can listen to those deep emotional needs of the people on our team, if we're leaders, or the students in our classrooms, then you're not going to see some of that acting out and some of that difficult behavior. And then finally, dependability. So do you show up? Are you showing up for the people around you? And so in a nutshell, that's the BUILD acronym: boundaries, understanding, integrity, listening, and dependability. And that's what my book is based on.
Man, that is so good. Um, but I think also that doesn't just apply in education, like those principles apply in life, in business. I mean, you can take those and they're transferable because
Yeah.
you have to build wherever you are. I think even just thinking about that, as I said that, thinking about each phase of our lives, right? Like we have to
Yeah.
build in each professional relationships, personal, we have to build in each phase of our life as well.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so good. Well, Success Chronicles, I have to ask you about success. What is your definition of success?
Oh my goodness. I have thought about this so much. What a great question. I think
Hmm.
first I'm going to say what it's not.
Yep, yep, yep.
You know, I think that there's this outward vision of what success is when you feel like you're not there. And I don't know if I ever feel like, do you ever feel like you arrived? I don't know. I think there's a certain amount of gratitude that we get to, that makes you feel grateful for where you are.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's about money. And it's not about notoriety or the way that people receive you or don't. I think it really does come down to when you sit with yourself and you're alone and you don't have any outside influences. Are you happy with the way that you're living your life? Is it lining up in the way that you intend to be living your life? And so if your intention matches the way that you're walking through life, I think that's success. I think if you're in a state of fight or flight, or if you're hustling and you are stressed and you are running all the time, or you're on that hamster wheel, I don't know if that's not really success for me, because I don't ever think that you're able to sort of breathe and pause and take it all in and have gratitude for where you're at. But if you can sit there and you can be like, I think life's pretty good right now. I've got people I love who love me. I'm on a trajectory that feels hopeful. And when I look at the future, I feel a sense of satisfaction with the way that I'm interacting with the world. We're going to touch on legacy, I think, but that piece being there where you're like, am I leaving a trail behind that I'm proud of? What more is there in life? What else is there?
I have one word in response to that definition, and that word is Boom. Let's go.
Yes,
Wait,
let's do
wait,
it.
that's three words. Hey, uh,
Oh.
I think it's so true. I love how you talked about alignment. That's one of my things too. I believe that when you are, I love how you verbalize that too, because a lot of
Mm,
people can't verbalize, okay, am I living in a manner of how I want to live?
yeah,
Right? Am I tapping into the God-given talents and abilities that the big man has given us, and am I maximizing those to be of benefit to others? And so
yeah.
I call that being in alignment with your assignment,
I
right?
love
Come
that.
on.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. You're
Yeah.
so right about that.
Yeah. And so when you operate in that manner, it seems like everything just falls in line. Now, of course, we know it takes work. It takes inner work for sure.
Yes, it does.
But
Yes, it
but
does.
but when you get to a place where you are in alignment with your assignment, I agree with you. I believe that is success, which ultimately is happiness and fulfillment.
Yes, a hundred
Yeah.
percent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't, they say that thing, you can't, whatever you accumulate in terms of material wealth or whatever, you really
Hmm.
can't take that with you. All you
Right.
have is your experience and the people around you. And they say that even, they say the number one determinant of your overall well-being, longevity, happiness, everything, it comes down to your social connections and like not an accumulation of people, but the quality of the people around you who genuinely know and care for you. And in turn, who
Man.
you care for. That's
Yeah.
rich.
Yeah.
That's being rich.
Yeah, no doubt. Rich in relationships.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, let's hit on, I know there's a couple things that you're pretty passionate about.
Yeah.
And one of those being the coaching piece. All
Hmm.
right. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that.
Well, you know what? The coaching has been kind of a fun surprise. And with all of the projects that I've been doing, whether it's the podcast, it's
Hmm.
books, it's the coaching, it really comes down to teaching. It's teaching on paper, it's teaching one-on-one, it's teaching with little kids, but it's also with adults. And so one of the most fulfilling things that I've had the pleasure of delving into lately has been coaching. And I've been doing this one-on-one and not just in education. So I had somebody come up to me at one of my speaking, because I do a lot of speaking and I speak to educators, leaders, superintendents. And I had somebody come up to me and he was a young principal. I think he was like 31 or something, young guy, bright eyes. And he comes up to me, he's like, "How do I do what you're doing?" And I'm like, "Well, what's holding you back?" He's like, "Well, I'm doing my PhD." And I'm like, "Well, that's wonderful." And he's like, "But I just, I want to do a podcast and I want to speak." And I'm like, "Well, what are you waiting for?" And he's like, "Well, I have to be done my PhD." I said, "Why? You don't have to be done. You can do all this stuff. I mean, it's a lot, but you don't have to wait for permission to get started." And he was like, "Oh." Yeah, I guess you're right. And I said, yeah, like
Yeah.
what do you want to do this for? He's like, well, I want to help other leaders. I said, well, can't you do that now? You already have this beautiful framework. He had described to me this wonderful framework. And I said, this is wonderful. You've already got
Yeah.
it. And you don't need to wait until you've completed X or until you're a certain age, or you don't have to wait. If it's in your heart and it's calling you, then explore that. And your taste might be better than your ability right now. And what I mean by that is how you show up, your podcast, the skill, the way you interact, all that stuff may not be where you want it to be, but have patience and like deep, sort of compassion for yourself as you rumble through becoming the person that you know you're meant to be. And so he actually now has a podcast. He's completed his PhD. He's got a book on the go. And I'm not going to say that it's because of me, but I think just that little door opening saying, you don't need to wait and you don't have to ask for permission. Wow. It's incredible to see what people do when they're given that little push out the door. And I have another guy who I've been working with who's not in education, and he had many people under him. He was leading in IT realm at a university, and he wanted to start coaching with me. And I said, great, that's awesome. What are your goals? And he said, oh, I really want to, I want this dream job, but I don't think I'm ready yet. And I said, well, interesting. What would it take for you to be ready? Like what, if you can point to someone in your life who is an avatar of what you would like to be one day, what ready would look like, what would that be? And he kind of described this person. And we basically deconstructed together, like, how do you become that? You already are that because you have it in you. You can see the greatness. How do we get you to be that? And so over the next 3 months, we worked together. And guess what? He applied for this job and he got it. He got his dream job and now he's in it. And he is like, this is the best job I could have ever had. He's more successful. He's making more money, all the things. And I think it's really, again, back to this whole, let's actually step into the person that you envision you're capable of becoming, but something, this limiting belief is holding you back. And so I think one of my biggest passions is helping people to see their own greatness and then to really step into that. And wow, the sky's the limit. It really is.
That is so good. I just, man, in that one brief statement that you gave about the coaching piece, I think there's so many gems in that. First off, I think activating the greatness within them is the first thing. I heard this story about um, a person had a credit card and they went to use the credit card and the credit card didn't work. And they were wondering, like, man, I have money or whatever, right? But they didn't activate it.
Ah, right.
And
Right.
so we have the skills, we have the abilities, we've been given the God-given ability. We just have to activate our greatness within us.
Yes.
All right. And
Yes.
and and here's the big thing, and you said this, nobody has to give you permission but you. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like like bro, like when you give yourself permission, oh wait, there is no limit. Like I can do whatever. Like I can do a
Yes.
podcast and do all of this. Like
Yes.
really? Oh,
Yes.
yes, you can. Like there is no limit.
Yeah. I love that. And I think honestly, I I sort of realized, I met Seth Godin and he became he
Mm.
I some people may not really know who he is, but he's someone who a lot of, really big podcasters reference often. Chris Williamson, Tim Ferriss,
Yeah.
Gary Vee, all these guys are like he's the GOAT when it comes to marketing, when it comes to showing up authentically. Like Seth is amazing. And I've had the pleasure and the honor of having him endorse my books, of working with him one-on-one where he was coaching me. And he consistently reminded me that it's not about, being picked and it's not about, being one of the golden ones. It's consistency and it's showing up in service. And if you can tap into that, it honestly gives me chills again. If you can tap into that greatness that you have inside yourself and show up consistently for your audience, that is magic. That is what knocks things out of the park. And there's really no difference between you, me, or anyone else, but that sort of connection to your calling and then that consistent showing up. That's it. That's the magic. And
Yeah.
so that's it. That's all you need to do. And that's a beautiful thing, when you really do connect with that piece.
That's good. I love that. I think too, just one thing that comes up for me, I think it's a process to have that consistency. And we have to
Yeah.
start with our habits. Our habits build those routines. Routines give us consistency, and then consistency allows us to build trust. And you talked about this earlier, with those around us, but more so, it shows you that you can trust yourself. It
Oh my
shows you,
gosh.
it shows you that you can do great things. And like, just hearing you talk about your journey and the amazing things that you've been blessed to achieve, like you will blow yourself away with the amazing things that you will accomplish just by starting with your habits, your routines, which gives you that consistency and allows you to trust. So then now, when you get in any situation, you can say that in your coaching to the guy that needs to know he just needs to start, right? Like you can say that to him with confidence, right? Like, no, just start, man. Take one step today.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you don't need the great running shoes to take one step.
No, you
No,
don't.
bro. Like step in your slides, in your sandals. Just take one step.
Yeah,
Right?
that's right. That's right. And I think you're so right about that. It builds trust with yourself. And I think that's everything. And you
Yeah.
don't need I mean, a little morning routine is fine, whatever, but you don't need a 42 step,
No.
cold plunge routine to like you don't
No.
need like the perfect pen to
It's
start writing.
simple. Yep.
Literally just pick up a pen and paper and do it, or just start throwing things into your notes app,
Come
start
on.
practicing, yeah, with like audio texts, or jump on Instagram, and you don't even have to use your own name. You don't have to use your own face. You could just do it as an audio and then have a background of some B-roll, of the forest or something, and just start talking about things you care about and practice. And then after a time, you're going to notice actually that starts to gel. Listen to people. Like if you don't have ideas, go listen to some podcasts, read books, open your mind, crack those things open.
Yeah.
And by exposing yourself to new ideas, new people, you learn and you get mentors that way. Like you get
Hmm.
mentors. Isn't it amazing that we live in this day and age where we have access to mentors that we don't even need to know,
Oh
but they
my
are offering
gosh.
everything for free if you
Oh
jump
my
on a
gosh.
podcast? Isn't it amazing? We're very
Uh,
lucky in this time.
right. And just being able to tap into the resources too, just like you said, just hearing you, like, I speak, I write, I do a podcast, I do
Hmm.
all of the things. But I'm also the reason I do those is because I strive to work for growth and learn.
Yes.
And it's so cool. Like I'll just say, just like how you talked about your guy, like Eric Thomas is that for me, ET. And so like, I watch his speeches, I listen to his inspiration,
Yeah.
even a coach needs a coach, you know,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So so why not, man? And that brings me to my other piece that I want to kind of last question here with you. Just talking about those journeys of how we go from learning all of the things and going through the processes and then taking what we've learned and using that to inspire and help others. I believe when we do that, not only does it allow us to leave a legacy, but I believe it allows us to live a legacy by our day-to-day actions. So let's touch on legacy. Talk to us a little bit about legacy for you.
Yeah. And legacy, I guess it's kind of complicated because when you think of legacy, you're like, oh, what am I leaving behind when I'm dead? But I also think, which sounds kind of morbid, but I think legacy is also about how do you positively influence the people around you
Yeah.
to step into the best version of themselves and to be inspired to hold themselves to a certain ideal as well. And it doesn't have to be your ideal. What matters to me may not matter to anybody else, but it might tap into that same sense of inspiration, which is, I kind of see Morgana over there and she's like showing up at the gym 3 to 5 times a week, and she's consistently showing up for that. That seems like a good plan around 40, because I'm turning 40 this year and I'm like, oh my gosh. But taking care of yourself. Um, I think the legacy being, don't be afraid of the things that seem really scary, like going back to school and getting your master's, or changing careers, or deciding to be a principal, or starting a podcast, or having children, or whatever it is that you want to do. I think being able to maybe have the legacy of, when we step into the truest version of who we are, that life becomes really big and beautiful. And aren't we all entitled to that? And through that, we get to shine a light on what's possible for other people. And hopefully, instead of feeling a sense of despair about the future, that people can cling to a sense of hope. She did it, and things were not easy for her, but she did it. And so my hope is that some little trickle of that, is accessible to other people around me. And that
Yeah.
is honestly, that would make me happy as a legacy.
That's awesome. Well, as we close, I'd love for you to get an opportunity to share with the audience where they can go follow you, check you out, and show you some love with all of the amazing things you have going on, and get those books.
Well, my name is Morgane Michael, and you can search me up. I've got my website, MORGANE Michael.com. And then also on Instagram, I'm really active at Small Act Big Impact, or just search my name. And then if you want me to come speak, you can either search up my name and reach out to me. I love responding to emails from listeners and fans. And then also my book you can get on Solution Tree Publishers. I've got 2 books, From Burnt Out to Fired Up, and then A Blueprint for Belonging. So if either of those are interesting to you, either for purchase or for speaking, just reach out to Solution Tree and they will get you in touch with me.
Awesome, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me and do this session. I wish you continued success.
Thank you, Chip, so much. And I can't wait to have you back on the show sometime. It would be so nice to chat with you about all of your amazing work. So thank you for having me on.
All right. And thank you guys for checking out this episode. We'll see you next time. God bless. Go get it.